The movie begins with a soldier named Mason, who reflects on his life, emphasizing its simplicity and lack of extraordinary desires. Despite having the same needs as everyone else, he moves forward in life, joining the military and eventually being recruited into special forces. Amidst this journey, he gets married to a girl named Jenny, and they have their first child, a daughter. However, Mason's life started changing after he received his next mission. Leading his entire team, their objective was to eliminate a tyrant named Ivan. As they were en route, their helicopter came under attack, resulting in the death of all Mason's comrades. He survived, and from that moment, he decided to leave the special forces. Returning, he pursued a law degree, even though he hadn't completed it, and became a lawyer. Since then, his life has unfolded in this manner. In the present time, we see Mason taking his daughter, Casey, to school. During their journey, Casey mentions being bothered by a boy repeatedly. Mason advises her that if it happens again, she should directly punch the boy. After dropping her off, Mason heads to his office, where he encounters Sebastian, a man who has known Mason from his special forces days. Sebastian now runs a security company called CIA, providing security services to people. Sebastian tells Mason that he has an excellent job for him, to become a bodyguard for a journalist who is going to interview a dictator named Ivan, set to become the president. Hearing Ivan's name, Mason is stirred as he realizes it's the same man who led to the demise of his team. Mason initially refuses, but when Sebastian reveals the substantial payment involved, Mason reluctantly agrees to take on the task. Returning home at night after taking on the assignment, Mason faces scolding from his wife about their daughter getting into a fight at school. Jenny expresses concern about the troubles in their lives and questions why Mason is adding to them. Mason, initially silent, reveals Sebastian's job offer and the substantial payment involved. Jenny advises him against taking the mission, urging him to stay where he is and continue with his current work. However, Mason insists that he has to go, and eventually, Jenny reluctantly agrees. Mason believes that spending some time away might help him gain clarity about his family. He meets journalist Claire and they board a private jet. Claire informs Mason that he must always stay close, ensuring his attention is on her for security. As the plane lands, they encounter Ivan, who warmly welcomes Claire for the interview. While Ivan's men search Mason, finding nothing, they let him join them in the car. During the ride, Ivan begins sharing Mason's past, revealing that he has thoroughly researched him, including his time in the special forces. Mason realizes Ivan knows about his military background. Slowly, as they reach a bridge, the car ahead of them explodes, with security personnel inside. Rebels surround them, initiating gunfire. Witnessing this, Mason is astonished and takes control of the car, systematically eliminating all the surrounding vehicles. He uses his gun to eliminate the rebels one by one. When he believes everyone is defeated, he approaches the security car, retrieves all the weapons from inside, and takes a moment to assess the situation. After witnessing the events, Ivan approaches Mason and questions their presence. He insists they must leave for the village where his people are, stating that if they have attacked him, they will go after Mason's village too. Ivan tells Mason that saving those people is not his concern. His job is solely to protect Claire. The decision of who to save and who to let die is now Mason's to make. After conveying this, Ivan departs, taking Claire with him. Advancing further into the jungle, Claire becomes exhausted, prompting them to take a break. Mason takes out his phone and makes a call to Sebastian, explaining the situation. Sebastian reassures him and promises to send reinforcements as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Ivan arrives at the scene, demanding Mason to give him the phone. Mason, unwilling to comply, warns Ivan about his capabilities. Ivan insists, and a standoff ensues with Claire caught in the middle. Claire intervenes, urging Mason to give him the phone to prevent further violence. Reluctantly, Mason hands the phone to Ivan. Then, Ivan makes a call to his nephew George. As soon as George hears Ivan's voice, he is astonished and amazed. We learn that George is the mastermind behind wanting to eliminate Ivan, and Ivan is well aware of this. Ivan intentionally called George to let everyone know that he is still alive. After the conversation, Ivan hangs up. When Claire learns about George's intentions, she becomes distressed. Ivan explains to Claire that revenge manipulated George, and he now seeks help. Ivan clarifies that he didn't come here to assist Mason but to move forward with Claire. As they approach a short distance, Claire talks to Mason, urging him to help Ivan, as he is alone and wants to assist his people. Mason refuses again, and Claire questions why he harbors such hatred for Ivan. Meanwhile, Mason notices a courtyard and becomes pleased, thinking that Sebastian has sent reinforcements. However, as two individuals with weapons emerge from inside the courtyard, the situation changes. The courtyard is lifted back into the sky, and Mason realizes it's not their support. Recognizing an imminent attack, Mason decides to flee with Claire. The courtyard assailants continue firing blindly, creating chaos as Mason and Claire escape. Mason realizes that if he doesn't eliminate the courtyard threat, they won't stop pursuing him. Quickly retrieving his sniper rifle, he takes aim. Meanwhile, Claire records the entire situation. Mason fires, hitting the pilot directly, causing the courtyard to crash. The assailants start fleeing as the blast wave approaches. Claire also begins running, realizing she's far from Mason. In the chaos, rebel forces advance towards Claire, who hides behind a tree. A rebel slowly approaches, but before reaching her, Mason arrives, taking him down. Claire observes the scene carefully, and as she approaches Mason, he notices another rebel aiming at him. Before the rebel can shoot, Ivan intervenes, saving Mason's life. With the immediate threat eliminated, they advance. Meanwhile, George arrives at the crashed courtyard with his men. As they explore, another vehicle arrives, carrying Colonel Jane. Jane informs George that Ivan is still alive, warning against any further mistakes. As they spot Mason resting by the riverbank, Claire inquires about his last mission. Mason recounts losing all his comrades in the final mission. After a brief pause, Ivan arrives with them. The villagers, joyous to see Ivan, warmly welcome him. The village head introduces Ivan to everyone, and they decide to stay in the village for a few days. Ivan and Claire, with their respective reasons, get ready. Ivan for upcoming responsibilities, and Claire for an interview. Claire begins Ivan's interview, questioning why everyone wants to kill him. Ivan explains that the land in Poldnya is rich in minerals, coveted by multinational companies for groundbreaking technologies. These companies attempted to exploit the land and even offered him bribes, but he refused, leading to constant attempts on his life. After listening carefully to Ivan's account, Mizan realizes that he isn't a bad person. Rather, outsiders have painted him negatively. Mizan contemplates the situation and goes to Claire, urging her to get ready quickly for departure. Ivan interrupts, questioning the rush, and insists on staying to uncover the truth behind his presence. Meanwhile, Mizan calls Sebastian to inquire about the situation, and Sebastian reveals that he wasn't sent for Claire's security. Rather, he was chosen to eliminate Ivan. Sebastian knew that Mizan had a personal vendetta against Ivan, making him the perfect candidate for the task. Shocked, Mizan cuts the call and proceeds to confront Jenny, expressing his love and emphasizing the importance of his family. After this revelation, Jenny urges him to come home as soon as possible. Mizan pulls out his gun and advances towards Ivan, but instead of shooting him, he grabs Claire's hand, declaring their departure. Ivan tries to stop them, but Mizan and Claire don't relent. As Jane and his men start attacking the village, Yvonne rushes in to stop the violence. Jane, however, continues his ruthless act, causing Yvonne to intervene. When Ivan arrives and witnesses the chaos, he decides to confront Jane. Seeing Claire's reaction, she urges Mizan to take action, fearing the villagers' fate if Ivan is harmed. Mizan, realizing the need for a strategic approach, quickly organizes a plan. He provides a horse for Claire and takes another for himself, putting both of them on horseback. Ivan is also given a horse to join them, and they begin their escape. However, halfway through, Claire falls off her horse, leading to Jane's men capturing her. Mizan understands that he can't face Jane's entire group alone and needs a proper plan to save Claire and Ivan. In the night, Ivan calls upon his ally, Lavo Lado, for assistance. The next day, they plan their strategy. As Lado confronts Jane, Mizan meets with Ivan. When Jane's men arrive, a tense standoff occurs, each pointing their weapons at the other. Jane warns that if Ivan doesn't surrender, Claire will be the first to perish, followed by Ivan himself. Mizan, hearing this, calls Ivan to the side. However, Ivan isn't alone. Civilians from the village accompany him, causing Jane to reconsider. Jane, realizing he's outnumbered, threatens to harm Claire. In response, Mizan decides to create a distraction, prompting a sudden attack from the civilians. Caught off guard, Jane and his men find themselves overwhelmed. Mizan seizes this opportunity, and along with Ivan and Claire, they manage to escape, leaving Jane and his distracted forces behind. Van leads them into a secret passage inside the palace. Quietly, they enter the palace and proceed to Ivan's chamber, where they find George. Upon seeing Ivan, George becomes anxious. Ivan tries to calm him, explaining that Jane is manipulating him. George, realizing the truth, becomes apprehensive. Ivan tells George that Jane used him once and won't spare him once he gets what he wants. He urges George to use his intellect. Without any resentment, George accepts Ivan's words, and the two embrace. Suddenly, the general arrives and shoots at Ivan. In defense, Ivan pulls out his gun and shoots the general. Mizan realizes Ivan wore a bulletproof vest, escaping unharmed. Their attention turns to George, who got shot while the general fired upon them. As Jane's soldiers approach, they see the bullet struck George while the general was shooting at them. George breathes his last, and Ivan, deeply saddened, holds him in his arms. Meanwhile, Paladinian soldiers enter the room, brandishing their weapons. Ivan confronts them, trying to explain that the real enemy is Colonel Jane and understanding the imminent danger to everyone's lives. Ivan emphasizes that Jane is their true adversary, not him. Slowly, Colonel Jane's forces advance, but they face resistance from Paladinian soldiers. Gunfire erupts from all sides. Ivan, Messin, and Clear take cover behind a desk. Clear records the events on her phone, while Messin continues firing at Jane's forces. After a while, Jane's soldiers retreat, and Messin prioritizes the safety of Ivan and Clear. He takes them to safety, but Jane, realizing the situation, brings his men forward. Gunshots intensify, and Messin instructs Ivan and Clear to leave while he continues to engage the enemy. As Jane's forces withdraw, Messin confronts Clear and Ivan, urging them to escape. The confrontation between Messin and Jane becomes a prolonged and intense battle. During this battle, Jane admits to orchestrating the deaths of Messin's comrades but acknowledges Messin's survival. Messin realizes he had misunderstood Van as the enemy, while the true adversary is Jane. Jane attempts to stab Messin, but Clear intervenes, rendering Jane unconscious. As they descend, rebels surround them, and gunfire intensifies. Observing the overwhelming number of rebels, Messin takes up a machine gun and systematically fights back, determined not to succumb easily. Clear continues recording, knowing the rebels are formidable, but Messin refuses to concede, unwavering in his resolve to fight. After a short while, they witness help arriving, and all the rebels outside are neutralized. The remaining rebels are captured, bringing joy to the people. When Clear encounters the moment, she broadcasts her entire recording globally, revealing the truth. Soon, the world learns who the real enemy is. Assistance pours in from all over, and Ivan is declared the new president of Padonia. Grateful, he expresses his thanks to Clear and Messin and begins delivering his speech, which is broadcast worldwide. Everywhere, Messin's story is being shared. When Jenny sees Messin on TV, she feels ecstatic. As Messin returns home, his daughter is overjoyed, and Jenny's time passes happily. After a while, Messin receives a message on his phone. Ivan has sent him a gift, and upon checking his account balance, Messin discovers that Ivan has sent him $5 million. Messin is thrilled by this gesture and goes back to his wife and child, telling them it's time for a vacation. With this movie concludes. I hope you have liked this movie recap. Please like, share and subscribe for more real recaps.